Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast where I bring you the best and the brightest from the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. My guest today, Chrisa Zindros, brings over a decade of management and executive level leadership to the Handle Group as the Chief Strategy Officer and Senior Executive Coach. In her role as an executive coach, she leads diversity and inclusion workshops, culture transformations, and high potential training programs across the globe. Hopefully we'll get back to some of that fun travel soon. And she supports both growing companies and industry conglomerates in designing cultures and structures that lead to increased employee retention, engagement, and profitability. But we're going to get into some real executive coaching and what it's all about. And her roster of individual clients include an international group of serial entrepreneurs, perennial corporate executives, and established individual contributors from every sector unimaginable. So let's get to it. We're going to unpack her career and what executive coaching is all about. Chrisa Zindros, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is so much fun.
We will make it as fun as possible. That's the goal.
So far, it's great. Good energy.
Right, and we've connected. We connected a few weeks back, and we got to know each other a little bit and learning about each other's backgrounds. So let's share that with everybody. And as I mentioned on that call, I think there's so much value to understanding someone's career journey and how they got to where they are, and how those experiences in that foundation really have led to where you're at today. So let's get into it a little bit and talk about your early career. And before you got into executive coaching, your first couple of corporate gigs were related to visual merchandising and management at the Ann Inc. And if anybody doesn't know, that's Ann Taylor, Loft, Jones, New York. How would you describe that early career stage and what made it really interesting to you? I mean, how'd you get into visual merchandising?
Oh, okay. So I'll tell you the story. Okay.
Please, that's what it's all about here.
You remember the store G Fox? It was like the precursor to Filene's, i.e. the precursor
Okay, got it.
to like Macy's. Okay. So my mom used to go to G Fox every Sunday. And one day we walked in and somebody was dressing the mannequin. And I was like, Mom, I want to do that. She was like, whatever. Like, she just poo-pooed me. And I really was struck by this person dressing this mannequin. I thought it was so cool. They got to like create the outfit, and it was like multiple mannequins on this pedestal. And I was blown away by it. And then I saw the movie Mannequin, which is
I was about to get there. Yep. That was my next line of questioning.
Yes, but I saw the movie Mannequin. I'm like, this is going to be my job. I want to do like the windows. Okay. So I was really hooked at an early age. The truth about me is that I'm somebody who has a lot of like creativity, and I have a creative side. But I also have like a business side to me. So visual merchandising and marketing really have a nice balance of those two things, where you can be creative and think big picture and do things with your hands and use color and texture and psychology in a way that like is profound and also drives business, right? And then there's like the logical component of how you drive a business. So from a very early age, I was very much drawn to doing something creative, but then also figuring out how to create business from it. And that's how I decided to get into visual merchandising. I interestingly found myself at 18 working for a tiny little mom and pop owned retail chain called B Moss. And it was on the East Coast. And if you know what B Moss is, I'd be really surprised. If anybody knows what B Moss is, please put it.
Anybody.
But the person who ran the visual department there saw a lot of potential in me, and they offered me a really kick-ass role. And so at 20, I was traveling all around the US, up and down the East Coast, opening stores and setting up like the entire visual display for this company. And that's what started my sort of parlay into visual merchandising.
Interesting. So being that you were 20 at the time, and now we're only 3 years later from that, what if you think about those early lessons, because those early days in people's career, they don't there's a lot of things they don't know, and there's a lot of things they think they know, but they actually don't. What was one of those really big lessons early on that you maybe learned the hard way?
Oh,
No one said this is gonna be easy.
it's a good question. So the thing that came up for me when you said that is the first time I had an employee get mad at me. And, I had always wanted to be the kind of boss that people would want to work with and like. And I really just, as in general, care about being a good person and having people like me. Like, I care about that. And so I thought that as a boss, I would lead with like being people's friends, not too much of a friend, but be a friend, right? Like, be somebody people can come talk to. And so
It's a balance.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance. And what I realized is that when you're a boss, it's really more about getting people to respect you than like you. That matters more. And I didn't learn that lesson till later on. But the very first instance I encountered was the situation where somebody who was a manager on my team was really mad at me because I had given them something to do and they felt like I could have done it and they were somewhat jealous. And it was a very immature sort of situation. But it was the first time I got confronted with like, wait, I thought you were my friend too. Like, I thought we got each other. And then I realized there's actually a difference, right?
Oh, yeah.
Just because you're someone's friend, it doesn't actually take place of being their boss and their leader. So you have to, as a leader, maintain this line that is really important to always maintain and never forget about.
It's tough, right? Because you somehow, a lot of people now, they become friends with their bosses, they become friends with their coworkers, but then it comes down to business. And a lot of folks have a hard time separating the two, and it's a fine line to walk. And we'll talk about that a little bit further in detail as we get into the executive coaching. But if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong here, your introduction to the Handel Group was actually being coached by someone in their executive leadership program, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you walk us through how that happened and how your mind was blown, how your eyes were opened into the world of executive coaching, and I really want to get to like when that light bulb went off moment.
Sure, yeah. So I actually found coaching begrudgingly. I didn't want to do coaching. There was a point in my career where I was really excelling and I was growing and I had gotten promoted and I inherited a team of people who happened to be all men and all older than me. And if we can go back a few years, like 2, which longer than that, this did not go very well. Did not go very well. And I was intimidated. I didn't know how to really lead the men. They were in a division where I didn't have a lot of experience. At the time, I really thought I needed to know everything about what my people do in order to support them, which is not true. But I just didn't know any better. And so I confronted this circumstance that should have been a really awesome celebratory time in my career. And instead, I was paralyzed by fear and anxiety and also failing. I was actually failing at leading this new team. And my sort of like decision was, I'm going to go quit because I can't do this job. And one of my close colleagues had a coach and she recommended I get a coach to support me. And I was like, who does that? Nobody does that. I don't need to do that.
I don't need that.
Coach. I always joke, my family's Greek, right? So we just eat and drink our problems. Like, I'm not going to go talk to someone, air my dirty laundry. What are you talking about? And so she really did twist my arm into getting a coach. And finally, I did a little trial and error. I dated a bunch of different coaches. I found Handel Group, and I actually really fell in love with the style in which I was getting coached, the level of direct feedback, how humor was used to get me to laugh at myself, and how honest my coach was about her own experience. So I felt like I was working with somebody who wasn't just preaching, but was also doing the walk. And so that's what really got me hooked. And I never thought I was going to become a coach. This was not something I ever thought I would do. But after working with the coach and realizing the type of impact that they make, I was drawn to maybe I can do that in my career as well. So that's what
that's so interesting too. There's a couple of things I want to unpack on that one. That first and foremost is that moment when it's kind of like you're shocked, like you're experiencing something that you never even thought of in your life. You're like, wait a minute, I could do that and I might actually enjoy it and have a passion for it. But you were so passionate about visual merchandising. How did you shift? I mean, how did you even shift from saying this is something I've had my heart and mind set on since I was a kid and watching the mannequins get dressed to switching into executive coaching? Yeah. I mean, how does that mindset shift happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I had been working with a coach for a couple of years before I decided to train to become a coach. So there was this was a process.
It wasn't overnight. It wasn't like.
Yeah, it wasn't overnight. But what I thought would happen when I trained to be a coach is that I would learn a bunch of cool skills that I can use to support me in my career growth in like my real job, as I used to call it. And then I would use like my evening hours and my weekends to do what I would consider like pro bono work. Like that's how I looked at it in my life at the time. But one of the things that became really clear to me is actually visual merchandising / marketing is not all that different than working with a human, right? Like the same skills apply. Like when I'm working at a brand, it's like, okay, what's the brand mission? What do we want people to say about the brand, feel about the brand? And same thing with an executive. Like, what is your, the executive presence that you want? What do you want people to say about you? What's the reputation you want to cultivate? What's thought leadership we need to work on? It's the same type of thinking, just directed toward the person versus like the brand, right? And then when I'm doing culture work, it is also the same kind of work. Brand work is the PR outside, right? What your external client thinks about when they think about your brand. And then culture work is the PR inside, what your internal employees think about when they think about working for your company.
It's right? It's a very logical analogy.
Yeah, it's the same thing. So it's not that big of a departure, right? It would make sense that it would feel like a natural leap for me. And ultimately for myself, what happened is, and this is true for anyone who's listening, when they're feeling like they've accomplished something in their life, or they feel like they finally reached the pinnacle of whatever success they wanted to get, is once that happens for us, we get a little bored. And it's time to start thinking about what's next and reinventing and playing into a bigger game. And I was definitely getting a little bit bored in my career. And I really didn't want to go any further up. Like I was not really interested in being in management for the next 30 years. And
that's okay. And I think that a lot of people struggle in their career where it's okay. You start something at, in your 20s, and by the time you get to your early 30s, like maybe I'm just not into it anymore. And it's okay because, listen, we all have one life, and what's the point of wasting it away? But I want to triple back now, kind of doing a double rewind here. You mentioned that it was the style and approach. Tell us a little bit about that style that really resonated with you and said, I maybe I had a perception of what coaching might be, but the way that this coach engaged with me, their style and their approach, it really spoke to you. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah. So I did a couple of different types of coaching as I was being arm twisted by my friend to go get a coach. Okay. And most of the coaching that I encountered felt very, what I wanted to call cubicle-like. It felt very gray, very standard, very in the box. And when I came to Handel Group, the thing that really struck me was how when I met my coach and I said, hey, I'm here to work on being a better leader, she was like, great, but tell me about the rest of your life. So the process was more holistic. And because one of the things we believe as a company, and we actually all operate from, is if you're happy in your whole life, you are the most productive, effective employee that you can be. So there was no stone left unturned. And actually what we saw when I started working with my coach is that the same stuff that was tripping me up at work was also tripping me up in my personal life.
Interesting.
And I was not a great dater. I was actually in a really bad relationship that I was tolerating and pleasing. Like there were parallels, right? And what we got to work on was my personality traits that were getting in the way of my ultimate happiness, my default, or as we like to call them, negative personality traits that were getting in the way. And that for me was super profound because the minute I can see, oh, I have a trait. So the way we like to define traits in coaching, it's your emotional DNA. So everybody has a level of emotion that they experience based on the circumstances, whether you're sad, happy, disappointed, proud, frustrated. We all experience different emotions. How they present themselves, how they manifest in you is your trait. So the example I like to give to my clients is, when I'm sad, I look angry. I'm a yeller. Remember, I said my family's Greek, so it's very loud, a lot of swearing. I'm a yeller. I throw things. I scream at people when I'm sad. When my husband's sad, for example, he just is shut down, doesn't say anything, super quiet, introverted. Same emotion, just looks completely different, right? So my personality trait when I'm sad is like comes off as like aggressive, and his comes off as like depressed, right? So it's important to know these traits because how you come off to people is your reputation.
Of course.
Right. And so I didn't know I was having this impact on my direct reports with the type of traits that I was leading from.
Yeah, it's interesting because people always talk about like that separation between like your work life and your work personality and your home life and your home personality. It's not black and white, in my opinion. Yeah. There's a lot of crossover. I think that there's a lot of things that we keep to our personal self, our friends. There's a part of us that we keep inside, but recognizing the fact that we're one person and we're not going to really change is a breakthrough. And I assume that's part of the coaching process is to understand who we are and how we appear to the outside world. And we could get into that in a little bit, but let's get into executive coaching here. And I want everyone to kind of understand this. Not everybody wants to be coached and everybody's meant to be coached. How do you assess, Chrisa, if someone is coachable? Before we even get into, what coaching really is, how do we know? Because like for you, for example, you were kind of forced into it where someone said, hey, this would be good for you. Like, I'm kind of reluctant. Then there's people that come to you on their own, and obviously a mix of everything in between. But how do you assess if someone is going to be coachable?
Yeah. So if I'm getting a client, so say for example, someone's boss says, hey, you need to go get coached. And I'm getting this client from the boss, right? Like the client didn't really have a say. The very first thing I look for is, are you willing to actually participate in the process? If you're not willing to participate in the process, this is like not going to work at all, right? And I actually won't go forward with the person if they're not willing. It's sort of like doing a workout video, like pressing play and then not doing anything. Like there's no point in showing up. You're just wasting your time. Right.
It's like sitting on the Peloton and not pedaling because you just want to listen to the music, right?
Exactly. Like this is a waste of everyone's time and a waste of your whatever $2,000-$3,000 for your Peloton, right? Like you just wasted this money to sit here. So it's the first thing I ask. If you're not really willing, then don't bother, right? Coaching really is a process that requires your mental intention and physical effort. Again, you can come to a coaching call and I can give you all these ahas and we can understand something and see a different perspective. But unless you go actually apply it or act different physically in your real life, it doesn't matter. Nothing's going to change. So you have to be really willing to go do those things. And if you're not willing, it's not a fit for you.
How do you define executive coach for anyone out there? How would you define it? Because I think that there's a lot, and you and I spoke about this, offline. There's a lot of people out there calling themselves a coach, but what really makes somebody a real coach?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is like an executive coach is really somebody that sits on your board of advisors, right? So you want to think about that. All the most successful people have coaches of different types, right? I have some clients with multiple coaches, right? Like I'm just one of their executive coaches sometimes.
It's like a sports team when they have strength and training, mental, they have different coaches.
Right, exactly. To really be on your A game, right? And if you think about all that we take on in our day-to-day lives, like it's important to have somebody to help you reflect, help you see something from a different perspective. So the first thing I like to say is a coach is someone who sits on your board of advisors, and the coach doesn't have to be somebody who necessarily knows everything that you know, right? A lot of times people say, well, I'm an accountant, so I want someone who coaches accountants. I'm like, that's not really necessary because you already know everything about accounting. Like you don't need me to help you.
You know the subject matter. Yeah. You already are an expert in that area.
Exactly. So you need someone who can help show you your blind spots. In fact, it's a better way to get a coach is someone who's not in your sector necessarily, or it's not someone exactly like you, right, or has the same personality or same age. Like that, those kinds of things actually don't benefit you. The point of differences there make a bigger impact on the type of experience you're going to have as a coach, with the coach, right? But the thing is, what's interesting about coaches is that many people have decided that they want to become coaches because they realize they can make an impact on people's lives and they have experience that they want to share. All good reasons to become a coach.
Right, but does life experience always translate into being a good coach?
No, it doesn't. Here's what you need to look for when you're trying to find a coach. You want to find someone who's actually gone through the process themselves, okay? If your coach and you're getting a health coach, if your health coach is overweight, do not hire that person.
Yeah, you don't want me being your nutrition coach. That's a bad idea.
Sounds silly, but don't hire that person, right? The only way you can be a very good coach, truly, this is what makes coaching actually a very difficult profession to master, is if you're able to walk your own talk. That's the only way, right? Because
how do you prove that? How do you prove that on a when you're interviewing potential clients?
So if someone's interviewing me and they're asking about my own life experience, I really do share with them how I've gone through reorganizing my own life and fixing my own issues, right? Which we all have. And so I do share with them that I failed leading my team way back when. And then I did all this work to go fix it. Like, here's what I did to make it.
There's a lot of vulnerability there. There's a lot of honesty and self-awareness, which is key.
Yeah. And you want your coach to be able to share that with you, right? They need to have some level of a story or a journey where they've transformed themselves that they're going to teach from. The reason why this is important is because just because you know something doesn't mean you can change it. And most of us know a lot of stuff. And by the way, you don't need to hire a coach for anything. You can Google. Like I tell my clients all the time, do not pay me money so you can ask me how to be more efficient with your time.
Yeah, start with YouTube. I'm sure there's millions of hours worth of content on there in every language possible.
Exactly. You can go find everything on Google and YouTube.
Right.
You do not pay me for that, right? You're
Nope.
hiring someone to help you transform. You're hiring someone to hold you accountable, to support you, to help show you blind spots, etc. You're not hiring someone to give you tips and tricks. Do not waste your money. That's what you want.
And you don't want someone sitting there to pat you on the back. That's not what you're paying for. It's accountability, holding you accountable for change.
Exactly.
And putting in the work.
Yes, exactly. And so the only way somebody can really do that, and deeply really do that and know how to meet you where you are, is if they've gone through the process themselves, right? Or a process similar to yours.
It's interesting. I want to talk about, before we get into the process there, I want to talk about some of the myths that are out there. I'd love if you could debunk a couple of the big myths. What are some of these things that people say out there, the people that are naysayers of executive coaching? What do you hear out there, and how would you respond to them? What are some of the big ones?
Oh, a lot of times I'll hear like, what's the point of this? Like, I don't really, like, I'm already successful in my career. What's the point of this? It's like usually the thing.
What's the point?
What's the point? And usually it comes with like, I'm already successful or everything's going fine in my career. Most people think that you want to hire a coach when things are bad, right? That's when you've gone too long.
It's how you get yourself better.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So you actually really want to coach when you're rocking it so you can continue to like operate at peak performance.
It's putting gas on that fire. That's what I always tell people.
Exactly. Yes.
How do you accelerate? How do you take it to the next level?
Exactly. Yeah. So what's the point? And usually followed by, I'm successful. Why do I need this? The other thing I hear too is from people who are not like executives, like meaning they don't have fancy letters before their name. They'll also say like, well, I'm not an executive. Why do I need someone? Right? What they fail to keep in mind is that if you are in a company, whether you have fancy letters before your name or not, the truth is that you have a leadership role in that organization. If you're an individual contributor and you're running a function or a process, you are super important. And you know that if you were to leave and somebody else would come in and do your job, things would get messed up because you actually do make a difference because you own a process or a function, right? Despite not having letters in front of your name. So even if you don't think you have the right sort of, what is the word I'm looking for? Prestige associated, a coach can still be useful for you because even in your role, you still have to manage all the things executives do: politics, relationships, managing
mindset,
people, all of it. It's mindset.
It's process and mindset. So let's talk about the process for a little bit, and without giving away all your secrets. If people want, they could reach out and pay you for your time. But give us like a very high level overview, a structure of what that looks like from a discovery through working with folks. What is kind of that rough outline of a process to get someone from their initial intake and understanding about them to starting to do the work? And is there an end date? I mean, listen, we're in the business of consulting. Our whole business is keeping that clock going. Let's be real about it to a certain point, but we also want to see accomplishments and we want to see goal set. Talk to us a little bit about that process and what it looks like.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, not the proprietary secrets of the Handel Group, but
I won't divulge anything, I promise. But I will start
with, if you're listening, don't worry, we're not going to give away too many things.
Exactly. Well, I will start at that last question you just said, which is like, as consultants, we're in the game of keeping the business going. It's true. We are, right? Like from a business perspective, we do want to keep it going, right? Like, let's be fair. However, what I tell my clients is if you constantly need me, I have failed. You shouldn't need me the same way you needed me 3 years ago or 2 years ago or during this massive crisis you were going through, right? We should get to a place where you're thriving and you need me when you need me, not that you need me all the time. So a good metric you want to go for is seeing your clients wean off of you. And then, by the way, wean off of you will bring you tons of business if we're talking the business side of it, because you've done such a great job for them, right? And so I really do want to see my clients.
Pays for itself. If it's done well, it pays for itself. It's an investment. And I said that too when I invested in my executive coach. I said, I'm not looking at this as a cost. I'm looking as an investment. Yeah. And I saw the ROI from that. And if you have that mindset, it's a no-brainer.
Yes, exactly. So to your earlier question, the process that someone will go through when they want to come work with a coach, and I'll talk about working with me, is they come to what we call an intro call. And this is where they lay out what their current issues are and what they want to work on. And in that introductory call, what we talk about is sort of like the steps that we would take to help them really get from point A to point B. So it's a super high level, but this is to give the client an overarching idea of what it's going to look like, how much time, the general sort of process, etc. if they're interested at that point, then they come to their first session. On the first session, we do a deep dive into all the areas that a client wants to work on. And we tell people that you really need to pick about 3 to 5 areas at the very beginning to start.
You can't do everything right away. You can't just attack everything.
Exactly. But here's the thing about it. And if you have a coach, you know this, once you start working on one area, everything else improves, right? It's like when you start running, you lose weight everywhere. It's not just like on your legs, right? Like there's a benefit throughout your whole life. So we address the areas that the client wants to work on. And here's the thing about a good coach. When a client comes to me with a list of areas that they want to work on, what I'm listening for is, do I agree? And should we start there? And oftentimes I don't agree and we shouldn't start there. This is not that I don't want my clients to have what they want out of the experience, but it's because a client can't always see what's getting in their way. And we usually go towards like the low level fruit.
And is that a pattern interrupter technique in coaching that I've heard before too? Because if someone's coming in there, saying, hey, Chrisa, this is what I want to work on. I want this, and this, and I want to start with this. They kind of already have preconceived notions and you want to take a different approach. Is that something worth considering?
Yes, for sure. Like you're coming from your own perspective, right? In your own mind, you can only
so much psychology here.
Exactly.
You're almost a psychologist. I would say if you went down that path academically, you do pretty well.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so you really do want to get that, like you're coming from your own perspective and you're hiring a coach to give you a different perspective. Like that's really what we're here for, right? And then the other thing is that most people think they're going to come to coaching and they're going to see a result right away. Okay. Other big thing, if somebody promises you in 30 days, you're going to be different, they're lying. Do not believe them, okay? The truth is that you can actually cause drastic results in your life rather quickly. And depending on how much effort, as we talked about earlier, physical effort you're going to put in, and then also like mental and like intention, you're going to put in something, you can see drastic results quickly. But for most human beings, there's a process you have to go through.
You have to put in the work.
Tangible results is not possible. And most coaches hook people on by like promising like 10 days, like lose 20 pounds or whatever it might be. And it's just not how it works. And if it does happen in that way, you have to really get smart to the fact that it may not be long lasting, right? Because anybody can go do like juice diet and lose 10 pounds by Saturday, but can you maintain that lifestyle is the bigger question.
Consistency, it's a mindset, it's a shift.
Consistency, exactly. So in regards to what happens on this first call, what we really set up is like, okay, what do you want to work on? What are the results? And then my job is to listen in for what are you missing? And then not only what are you missing in terms of what you should be working on, it's like the how we want to go work on it. Because most people really care about doing the physical things that are going to produce the result. But in coaching, we really do know, and we teach our clients that how you're showing up, how you're being, what we call your emotional and your spiritual integrity. So spiritual having nothing to do with religion, but more about your value systems and your philosophies that you live by, and your emotional integrity, which is how you're showing up in the world, those personality traits that you're leading from, making sure that those are operating on all the right cylinders so that you can actually start to shift being who you currently are to who you need to be in order to get the results that you want. So that's what we're doing on our first session, is assessing where our starting point, the results, and then exactly how do we want to navigate to get to
how could you tell? I mean, you've been doing this a long time, I think 11 years at this point.
Yeah.
How could you tell if someone is being open and honest and authentic, and how do you as a coach create the right space for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not fun being married to me because I can spot people's bullshit really quickly.
Oh, I'm married to one of those too. My wife is Russian, so they solve their problems through eating and drinking. Also,
I understand Russian people.
The Greeks and the Russians are very similar from a cultural standpoint.
Exactly, we're very loud and a little forceful. So the truth is that a good coach can read through people's bullshit. Most human beings, for everybody listening, we leak out what we're trying to hide. We use certain words, we say things with a certain inflection, our body language changes.
Subconscious, of course.
We have these types of tells, and a good coach who has a very tuned ear, which is what we're trained to do, can spot it. So what I do when I notice that with a client is I start to ask questions, and I start to really try to pull apart like what's the issue. We probe until we get to like what we can go deal with and what people are willing to actually take on. The other piece of it is that sometimes I'll just say to a client, like, if you're not ready to deal with it, it's okay. Let's just be honest. You don't want to deal with it. And that frees them up to say, you know what, I don't want to step away from here. And then we can go deal with something else that I can actually take on.
Interesting. All right. So now we got the initial intake and we start to do the work. How important is giving someone the homework, and not just to do the work, but from a commitment standpoint, like to see if they're actually committed to it? Like, do you give a pretty lofty assignment in the beginning to see and test that level of commitment early on? Is that like a common practice? I mean, that's what I've heard is a common practice. Is that what you guys do?
Yeah, we definitely do have that like big first assignment to get people's,
Would be like a self-discovery, some kind of self-analysis.
Yeah, exactly.
Values.
It also really helps the coach get a quick picture, because if you want to go in and start to produce results, because coaches really are judged on how fast we can produce something for our client, how quickly we can get them, how fast we can get them to their point B or point C.
Mm-hmm.
So we need as much information and data up front in order to be able to navigate all that's challenging about a human, right? So that first assignment usually is pretty lofty. Sometimes, depending if a client's coming in from an organization like a company where we're already doing a program, it may not be as lofty, but it still is a pretty big assignment. But here's the thing about homework. I don't give homework just to give it. I don't use it as like a test, like, do you really want to be here? I think that homework is an important complement to the process, and it should be done really as a way to augment your experience. So the homework that I tend to give with my clients is really more actionable homework. And a lot of times that thinking deep dive homework, I'll actually do on my coaching sessions with somebody to really help them go through something that might be hard for them to really understand on their own. So we'll do that together. But usually my homework is like, great, go have that conversation with that person, or go and work out, or, videotape the fact that you made dinner for your family, whatever. Like, I'm giving them actionable things that they can start to implement so that they could really see the bang for their buck.
How do you hold them accountable? How do you, I mean, listen, if someone's lying to you and say they didn't do something, that's on them, right? If someone's paying you, I mean, they're paid, they want to do the work. They should do the work. And then they're just lying to themselves. But what are some of the techniques that you use to ensure accountability? Because I always tell people, I go, you want a coach that's not going to pat you on the back. You want someone that's going to hold you accountable, and you want someone who's going to see everything from that 30,000 foot view, as you said before, who doesn't have the blinders on. But how do you hold people accountable?
Annoy them.
That's my technique. I could be a coach. That is my method. I annoy the shit out of people. Exactly.
I annoy them. So the truth is, I give my clients a lot of space to like mess up and fail, right? That's the first part. In particular, the coaching that we do for Handel Group, we really do stress accountability. And we teach people a system of accountability that is a combination of making a promise, something you say you're going to go do, whether it's physical and tangible or just how you're going to show up in the world, and actually marrying that with a consequence, something that you're going to do if you don't do this promise. Right. So the consequence is exactly how human beings learn, right? Stick and carrot. We really do know that if you get in trouble for something, you're more likely to do the thing that you don't feel like doing. So we will make people go, hey, your consequence is you give your husband $10 every time you yell at him, and go tell him to give, you're going to do this. And then not only do I hold you accountable, but your husband's like, where's my $10 because you yelled at me? Right. We do set up that structure with people. So there is more accountability. The other thing that I have my clients do, especially when they're working on something really, really hard, is I have them create posses, is what I call them, where they'll send an update of all the things that they're doing, or all the promises that they have, another way of saying it, to this group of people that's going to cheer them on and support them. And I get CC'd on this email, or BCC, depending how the client feels comfortable, so I can see who's cheering them on. So now I got like 15 people in their world supporting them. Okay. So these are
that. Takes a village.
Takes a village for sure. These two techniques tend to be really powerful. And the last part is that sometimes clients need daily accountability. So I'm like, great. So you're going to text me every day when you leave work, or you're going to text me every night, the picture of your treadmill to let me know that you did this workout. Like, I can really go there with people when they're fighting tooth and nail, and it becomes a game. Right. It becomes a game, and sometimes they want to run away from me, but ultimately what they feel is supported and cared for. And then they just do the thing they said they were going to go do.
Chrisa, where do most people fail? Where do most people fail and fall off in your world? And we're not, I want to exclude the cost standpoint, because good coaching costs good money. Anybody who's committed to it, they've already like made that financial commitment. But where do they fall off as far as being committed to doing the work? Where do you see people ghosting and terminating the process? Where does that happen, and what stage?
It's different for everybody. The biggest issue is getting people to understand that discipline is never sexy. but it's
Oh.
always successful. So what I tell clients, so it's not fun to have discipline. It's really inconvenient, actually, and annoying. And most people will encounter some outside circumstance, whatever it might be, whether it's like your kid is sick or you have to work from home or something.
But putting aside these external things, internally, why are people giving up on this? Well, those are excuses.
They're just excuses, but that's what all these things are, right?
Okay.
They're all excuses, and whether it's internal obstacles or external obstacles, they really stem from the same place. You're looking for a justification, a reason why you can't do what you said you were going to go do, right? Like that, and discipline ultimately is what's going to get you to the other side. What we teach in coaching is that you do have inner dialogue. So there's a way that you talk to yourself, a way that you like justify your behavior or even relate to your circumstances, and we boil its inner dialogue down to two main voices. So your chicken and your brat. Okay, your chicken being the voice of fear. So we all, most of us are really familiar with fight, flight, or freeze. So we just name it chicken to make you laugh about it.
I like it. Okay, we'll go with that.
Yeah, chicken, right? So all the different ways that you avoid, all the different ways that you're afraid to fail, mess up, get in trouble, all the ways that you shut down, all the things that we do as humans when we get scared or triggered in some way.
Of course.
And then brat, which is the voice of resistance, where you don't want to, where you don't feel like it, where you're not in the mood, where you're like, why do I have to do this? And so these are the two internal voices that get in our way all the time. And every time you're listening to your chicken or your brat, what I teach my clients is you're only surviving in this area. The areas where you are thriving and you get the results that you want and you're super happy and you're kicking ass, you're not listening to your chicken and your brat. You know how to shut those voices down and you hear them for what they're worth, right? So if you have a great body, it's because even when you're tired, even when it's raining, you go running, you get up and you go. And even when there's cake, you don't eat. Sorry?
Yeah, because you want it. You want it. You're disciplined. It's
You're
easier to do the things that you want versus the things no one wants to do the shit they don't want to do.
Well, the thing is, what's interesting is we want a lot of things, but we're not willing to work hard for them. The chicken and the brat really do convince us that like we're too tired, and the brat, right? We don't want to. We're too tired. You're not motivated. It's not the right time. Like they really do convince us otherwise. So what we teach our clients, and specifically when it comes to executive coaching, there's a lot of things at stake, right? With people who are going after starting their own business or leaving a big high profile job, like more things are at stake. So actually the more successful you become, the larger your chicken and brat can be, because there's more things you can lose, more things that are more uncomfortable to take on. So ultimately it's really getting that the way that we're programmed as human beings, this innate part of our mind that a lot of times we relate to as logic, is actually a very kind of early programming, right? Like our crocodile or reptilian brain. It's an early programming that keeps us just stuck in just surviving, just getting by. So anytime someone says, I just get by in this area, it just is what it is. I've never been able to get to this point or not, or to the other side of this. I'm just like, great. All you're dealing with is your chicken and your brat. And the minute you can understand that and be able to talk back to the chicken and the brat, be able to go, oh, yes, how my chicken sounds. That's how my brat sounds. My brat sounds like, you know what? I'm too tired to work out. I had a long day. That's what my brat sounds like, right? My chicken, and this is for real for me, my chicken sounds like, you know what? It's probably not the best time to have the conversation with them because fill in the blank. Every time I want to avoid a conversation, I say this, right? So the minute you can get that, you can go, oh, this is why I'm always surviving here. I'm just getting by because I'm not doing anything else but listening to the survival part of my brain.
That's fantastic. And I want to shift gears for a little bit. And you really are still doing a lot of marketing with the Handel Group. And I want to talk a little bit about the idea of Inner.U. Where did that idea come from? And who should take advantage of those resources?
Which idea?
Inner.U.
Oh, Inner.U. Yes. Inner.U. So Inner.U.
I feel like I forgot about that. Yeah.
Well, I didn't. I'm sorry to hear you said Inner.U. So let me just, this is a great thing that you brought up. I'm happy you did. So you mentioned it a couple times. You said for your own self that coaching is an investment that you made, right? And it really is. Good coaches do cost a good amount of money. It's true because
you pay for what you get, right?
Yeah,
like if you, yeah, exactly. You pay for what you get in life.
Yeah. So there's two sides to cost, right? There's actually the time investment and the money investment.
Correct.
So
time is money.
Yeah. One of the things we were running into with some of our clients, and we were realizing was an issue, is that a lot of people wanted to work with us, but there was a barrier to entry. Well, there was two, right? There was the time investment and the money investment. And so we created Inner.U to be a platform where a client can decide to go do a learner-led program, and not fully learner-led, because I'll get into how we support clients in the program itself. But they can elect to do this program, learner-led, on their own timeline, whenever they have the time to do so. They don't have to be available for a coach call at like 3:00 in the afternoon at a really discounted rate. So the program takes somebody through what an executive coaching series, because we have this program that we call Enter You Career, that's the executive coaching program, or a life coaching series would look like, which is Enter You Life, will take you through exactly what you would get with a coach.
So they're modules?
Modules. Yep. Modules that take
Online.
you through everything that you would learn with a coach, all homework assignments, all principles. You even get to hear coach examples. So it's like you're really sitting on a call with the coach and they're teaching you, hi, this is how you leverage this principle.
That's great. So it's making it accessible for people who have some kind of barrier to entry.
Yeah.
And they're getting into it. I mean, listen, from a business perspective, it's great because if they get into it, it's kind of like a starter course. They like it. And then when the time and financial means are right, they could upgrade to the one-on-one coaching.
Exactly. Yes. And part of it is for most people is that even if you've done some coaching in the past, you always need a little bit of a touch up. Like even I do too, right? I've been coaching for a long time. So I still go to some of my colleagues and I'm like, can you coach me? Like, what am I not seeing? Because you can't always see something on your own. So sometimes just re-listening to something or hearing another example helps you really figure out where you're getting stuck in your own world. So go ahead.
I'm sorry, continue. No, I was just going to say, I mean, it's a great entry to the program, but you hit on something. Constant self-improvement. How often are you being evaluated by other members on your team as far as your coaching effectiveness? It's kind of like when teachers have other teachers sit in on their lesson plans and doing that. Like, how do you keep sharp with your own craft, and how do you ensure that you're delivering your best?
Oh, that's a good question. We're kind of always assessed at Handel Group. It never ends. It never ends. So the thing about working for a coaching company is that you're around other coaches all the time. So you're always getting privy to someone else's style, someone else's insight, someone else's techniques. And because of the way Handel Group is set up, we're constantly interacting on group calls where we get to see people in their limelight, right? Like we really get to learn from each other. So it's actually quite beautiful. There are colleagues that I learn from all the time. I have a colleague, OC, who every time I talk to her, she blows me away. And I'm like, say that again, I'm going to write it down. Or I'm using
Are we recording this? Are we recording this, please?
Exactly.
Yeah. I need to go back and rewind on that.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's what makes it great about working in a company where there's other coaches and you're really working as a team together. And also when we work on big projects, we work with colleagues. We're not usually only one person on a big project, because the truth is you do need somebody else's perspective to help you navigate a big corporate structure. But also it's nice to have that varying perspective for people to pick from.
I was about to say, how often do you, I mean, does it happen where like you have an initial candidate client and you're like, you know what? I think OC might be better for you from a personality standpoint. Does it happen a lot?
Yes, for sure. There are plenty.
That shows as a client, that shows a lot that you're like, hey, listen, I may not be the best for you, but I know who is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's also great about being in a company where you have a pool of coaches to pick from. You can really get matched up with the right person based on personality or experience or any other preference that might come up.
You also speak about, and you're an advocate for women's empowerment. As an executive coach yourself, what do you feel is the most effective way to empower women in whatever industry that they're in?
Good question. You're hitting me with the good questions.
What I do, I mean, this is my strong suit. I mean, this is what I've been told I'm good at, so I got to stick with it, Chrisa.
Yes. You are very good at it. So the first thing I will say is like get them coaching or get them mentorships or mentors. One of the things that is changing drastically currently, but has not always been this way, is that 90% of my clients are men. And traditionally it's because women didn't get a lot of access to some of these additional benefits in companies. And that has drastically changed in the last couple of years. But one of the best ways to help women on your team is to get them coaching or get them a mentor, and specifically mentors who look like them or coaches who look like them. It's really important. Representation does matter. Right. So if you think about it, there's a lot of male coaches that coach a lot of men. There aren't a lot of women that coach a lot of women. Right. It's actually not very common. So you really want to make sure you're supporting people by giving them the access to a resource that can help develop them from all different levels.
I love it. That's fantastic. And I want to talk a little bit about leadership. I mean, you work with some heavy hitters. You definitely work with some heavy hitters and up and comers as well. What are a couple of those real strong characteristics and traits you see that are real universal in being great leaders?
So universal traits. The first one is ability to see themselves. When I get a leader who's like, you know what, I know that I suck at this. Like, I know that I am
Self-awareness,
not good at that. Exactly.
vulnerability, being humble, and self-awareness.
They're kind of like the ones that repeat themselves, right? They really are.
Pattern here.
Yeah, that's what we all need. These are, by the way, really hard traits and qualities for people to live by. But whenever I see a leader who comes very quickly and very powerfully to say, you know what, this is where I suck. Let me own this part of myself. I'm not a great listener, or I'm not great at this particular function, or I know I rub people the wrong way and I want to work on it. Those are leaders that are successful because they're constantly, you said it earlier, working to improve themselves, and they really are able to hear feedback from their people. When I get a leader who's like, I'm great, I'm good at leading people, I feel good about what I do, and they're not able to see any opportunities, that's where I'm just like, you might have some. There might be some blind spots. So the ones that come with that humility first and foremost are usually people who are great leaders. And I don't want to not underscore humility for a minute, because humility is really, really infectious. And leaders who have humility and are able to go sit in front of a room and say, I messed up.
Accountability.
I made the call, I did this, and this is on me. And not sit there and blame other people or point the finger or say, I didn't know, no one told me, whatever the logic may be or whatever the explanation may be. But those who can sit in front of a room and really be responsible, they have loyalty like you would never believe from their teams. And as we're coming out of this pandemic and we're going into a world where there's like people are hiring like crazy and there's about to be a crazy war on talent, being a humble leader will always retain your people because you inspire them and they're inspired by you and they want to mimic you.
That's what it's all about. A big theme that I'm getting from our conversation over the last 45 minutes from you is this: you're authentic, you're real. What is that word, authentic, authenticity? What does that mean when someone says it's not just a buzzword? It's what you are. But when I say it to you, what does that make you feel?
So I have a little catchphrase that I use. And the catchphrase is authenticity breeds confidence. And I use this catchphrase because anytime we're not being truly ourselves in whatever way, this doesn't take away the fact that there's politics and there's relationships and there's hierarchy and all that's always going to be true, right? But there's a way in which you don't divorce yourself even in those settings. Every time you're authentic to yourself, you become more confident. Why people lack confidence is because they are trying to manage being somebody else and they're trying to fit in and mold and blend, and that never works. Right. And in fact, if I bring it back to my marketing days, right, early back in the day, the thing that we would always think about with brands is, what is your point of difference? Like, why does somebody buy Calvin Klein jeans versus Guess jeans or whatever brand, right? Seven for All Mankind. Like, why do you buy them? You buy them because there's a point of difference. Ultimately, they're just jeans, the same cut, usually from the same factory. Don't tell anybody I told you, but usually just a different label. But you buy those brands for a particular reason. You affiliate with the brand for some reason. There's a difference in this brand versus that brand. And so that is also what you need to cultivate for yourself, and being comfortable to cultivate your own point of difference in whatever sector or industry you're in, or your company or your team, and feel good about that is really powerful. So when I hear the word authenticity, I hear that it breeds confidence, but it's really all about being clear about what makes you different and really standing in that versus like trying to hide it.
I love it. Well said there. And Chrisa, what is the single greatest piece of advice you've ever received that you take action on every single day of your life?
So I once worked at an insurance company. And this is funny for people who know me, because God help me that I worked at an insurance company. It's not a good fit. I had a boss. He was the most successful boss that I ever worked for until this day. He was super wealthy. He had a big book of business. People loved him. And he was retiring. And there was a bunch of other agents who were clamoring to get access to his book.
Yeah, they want his book.
Right? They wanted his book. And one day he was leaving, and I was just like a receptionist about, a really bad job for me. I'm not very operational, so didn't do so good. But he was leaving, and he asked me if I can like go buy a birthday card or something. And I was like, okay, great. And as he's walking out, he goes, hey, do you know why everybody wants my book of business or why I'm so successful? And I was like, I don't know. It's like 18, 19 years old. And he's just like, because I play golf. And I was like, what is this old man telling me? Like, what is he talking about? what ultimately he was saying that stuck with me, which is why I'm telling you the story today, is that he really took the time to care about his clients, like deeply care about them, not bullshit care, but deeply care. Like birthdays, going to weddings, like sitting for extra time. He cared about people, and he really did teach that to me. And so the idea that like authentically caring about people and taking time to know your staff, to know your client, and really deeply be there with them and not have it be transactional is the best lesson I ever got. Because I've never since working with him have ever operated differently, and it's paid dividends for sure.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I built my career on that, about real relationships and what that means to be there. The pandemic has been really interesting in so many different ways, and not just the obvious bad stuff, but we talk a lot about the silver linings. I'd love if you could share, and thankfully we're on our way out of this, at light at the end of the tunnel. But I'd love if you could share, Chrisa, a personal silver lining and a professional silver lining that you've experienced over the last 18 months. Yep.
I can't believe it's been so long.
We're almost done.
I didn't murder my husband. Silver lining.
I'm alive too. I am alive too. Thank God. And we're the lucky ones. So our murderous wives didn't.
We got close at one point. No.
Multiple times.
The silver lining for myself during the pandemic was actually I realized something about myself that I didn't know. And I realized that when things are really hard and challenging, I become super resourceful and figure out ways to infuse fun, which I didn't notice about myself, because I would tell you normally I'm a workaholic. I don't really like fun. Like, what do you mean watch TV or, go on a vacation? Like, you should work, right? This is my mentality. But in the pandemic, I really did go stand for, we're going to try to make the best of this. And I'm going to get resourceful for how to do that, whether it's like having a picnic on my kitchen floor or, doing what we used to call dinners in the car. We would go I live in Manhattan. So we'd go get takeout and sit like in the car by Central Park eating dinner. Like,
all right. Okay.
We tried to make it fun. So that's what I would say silver lining for me was. For work, and specifically as it pertains to coaching, during the pandemic, we also had this crazy attention and all these social issues, right? So we had the death of George Floyd. We had, like the Me Too movement continued to get focused. Black Lives Matter movement continued to get focused. And what it actually created for companies was a change in how they care about culture. And then on top of that, by the way, we all had to work from home. So now it's like a whole new world. So companies have always cared about culture. It's something that's on their radar. They have to deal with it, but it's not like the top of mind thing. Now people deeply understand how important having a good culture is, an inclusive culture, and how it actually impacts their bottom line. And companies have changed their tune. And that's a massive shift and a great thing to see in my business, but also for the world. Like, companies really do cause impact in our day-to-day society. So this shift, I believe, is going to cause a lot of great things to come in the next few years, because people are investing in the right types of resources for their employees.
Chrisa, what's next for you? I mean, you plan on staying in executive coaching, forever? Is this your forever job?
I think it is my forever job. I really am naturally a coach. I was like the little kid who listened to like adult problems and try to solve them. So I've always been this way. But currently for Handel Group, I'm also doing other things in the company. So I'm running a lot of the day-to-day operations. I'm helping HG as a company grow and scale. So I'm using sort of like that other side of my mind again. And that's really exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. And last but not least, you look back on your life and your career, and you think about those times when maybe things didn't come so easy to you, and you really had to dig down deep and harness that fire and harness that inner tenacity and find your compass and find your way forward. And on the flip side of that, when you sit here today and you're just grateful and you want to show gratitude for your success in your career and your life and your family, and you have that focus, Chrisa Zindros, what is your compass? What is your North Star in life?
Ooh, North Star compass. Okay. For me, it's always been making an impact. This is how I like to frame it. I'm definitely somebody, it's even like my love language. Like, I don't really care about gifts. I care about acts of service, like people like contributing to me really matters. So I'm always trying to figure out how I can contribute to other people. So my compass is always, how am I going to contribute in the most profound way or in the deepest way or in the best way, whether it's to my client right now or to like a direct report or to a friend.
I love it. That's fantastic. Chrisa, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Where could folks find you? Where could they connect with you? Where could they learn more?
Oh, awesome. Yes. Okay. So you can find me on LinkedIn at Chrisa Zindros Voice. You can also find me on Instagram. That's where I post a lot of the things that are happening in terms of speaking engagements and other podcasts and things like this. It's at Chrisa Z Voice on Instagram. Please actually follow there because we post a lot of HG's happenings and we offer a ton of free programming and content. Like you don't have to pay for it. It's literally community style. And so if you're wanting to get like support in your life at any level, definitely follow me and or Handel Group on Instagram. There's tons of opportunities to do things for free with us. And then also you did mention Inner You earlier. And if you're somebody who's been like kind of circling whether or not you should do coaching, I really do recommend Inner You. It definitely will give you everything you need. And if you want to do more, you can, or you can just do Inner You. Like it really is something you can use as your own platform. So I recommend that. And you can also find out about Inner You on Handel Group's Instagram page. And then the last thing that I would say is if you're curious about what would coaching tell you, we have what we call the current reality quiz. This is a quiz that basically helps assess where you are in your life. Like it's going to give you a rating. Like you rate a 4, which is pretty low. Don't be a 4. But sometimes it'll give you perspective that like that initial intake that I talked about that we do with clients, the quiz allows you to do on your own. So the current reality quiz is a good place to start. So
I'm going to do that for fun.
Yeah. And I think we're providing the links at the end of this. So go check that out.
Yes, everybody. The links will be on the live stream. The links will be in the podcast notes for everybody checking out the audio version of it. Chris, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Hang on with me for a moment here as we sign off. And everyone listening at home, if you found value in this show, please pay it forward. Please leave a review, rating, share with your friends. It goes a long way. You know where you can find more at thepodcast.com. You can follow us on all the social media handles. You know what they are. Remember, take care of each other, look out for one another, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.